I am pleased to welcome Pam Holy, who is the president of the Chilwaukee Prairie Preservation Fund. She was born in Kenosha, and when she grew up, she moved away, and she has now come back. When she was a kid, she played in the prairie as a little girl, and she is now back. She is has sort of taken over preservation of it, and she is here with us to share this ecological jewel. So without further ado, Pam Holy.
She left out the part where Chilwaukee Prairie is my passion. So I'm more of a passionate prairie lover than a public speaker. So maybe you'll cut me some slack on that one. It is an ecological jewel, Chilwaukee Prairie. That is what it is. It is also a state natural area, as opposed to a state recreation area like Bong, where they have all kinds of motorized activities and dog training, et cetera, as opposed to a state park where they have a lot of camping and fires and stuff like that. In a state natural area, you have really photography, hiking, enjoying the ecology, the plants, the animals. So there isn't really a lot of active motorized things, no horses. We don't have any horses at Chilwaukee. That was a joke, folks, but it's true. So that's a state natural area. Wisconsin has approximately 560, the last time I got a count, of state natural areas. Previously, they were called state scientific areas, which gives you an idea what they were for. They were under the Endangered Resources Bureau. So it's places that have very special natural components, ecology. So they are pretty much all ecological gems. Chilwaukee is quite special in that category, however, and that's why it is also a federal national natural landmark. Not all areas get that designation. And as of September of last year, Chilwaukee Prairie is part of a wetland, a designation as a wetland of international importance. This is a real feather in the cap of the people who have been trying for 50 years to preserve this prairie. It's a recognition of how special it is. Some of the reasons that it's special are that it is a rare remnant lake plain prairie. What does that mean? When the lake receded, probably 4,000 years ago, that was the beginning of the plant life at Chilwaukee Prairie, it left in stages, and it left swales and ridges, and also a topography that ran from the last lake edge down to the present lake edge. So you've got differences in water levels, you've got differences in soil, you've got a lot of micro communities. So we have sedge prairie. Sedges, of course, have edges. They're not grasses. Do we all know what sedges are? You don't have a lot of sedges in your gardens, do you? No. Anyhow, we have sedge prairie. We have a calcareous fen, which means that it's going to only have certain kinds of plants in it because it's very alkaline. There are wet areas, wet mesic areas, dry mesic and dry areas. So you get a real combination of little ecoclimates and soil conditions so that we wind up with 400 species of native plants. In addition to the plant material, the plants, of course, attract the insects and the birds, and so I think this count is low, but this is the only one that's published, is 125 species of nesting and migratory birds. It has the highest conservation significance for a Wisconsin legacy place. Wisconsin legacy places are different than state natural areas. They're fewer and more special than even the state natural areas. It's also been designated by the Wisconsin Wetland Association as a wetland gem, a Wisconsin wetland gem. We got that designation a couple of years ago. Chilwaukee Prairie is a key component in the natural area stretching from Kenosha, the city limits of Kenosha where the dunes are, all the way to the Waukegan Power Plant. I know a lot of you are from Racine, so you may not be all that familiar with the area. It's a stretch of about 13 miles. And it is what is called the Chewockie Prairie Illinois Beach Lake Plain. And that is where we got our Wetland of International Importance designation, because it is Ramsar certifies areas in the whole world that are important as wetlands. In Wisconsin, we have two. One up on Door County. Chewockie is part of the Chewockie Illinois Beach Lake Plain, which is also a Ramsar designated area. So it just confirms that what is here is very, very special. For the volunteers that have been working to preserve Chewockie Prairie for 50 years, this is really a landmark thing, because it tells the whole world, not just Wisconsin, not just the country, but the whole world, that this is really a special place. I don't know if you can read up there. I will give you some of these facts as soon as I put my reading glasses on. It's over 3,900 acres in it. Up at the top is the Kenosha Dunes. The line that runs mostly long is the railroad that runs from Wisconsin into Illinois. I guess it's the Metra now. It was called something different when I was a kid. These are the dunes that I played in as a child, too. At that time, we're talking about in the 1950s, it was just before the really terrible erosion from Lake Michigan. And the dunes at that time had cliffs by the shore that were as tall as this room, and cliff swallows dug their holes in and laid their eggs and nested in there every year. Come the 50s, that changed. So the dunes are quite a bit different than what they were when I was a kid. But there were wild strawberries and a variety of plants there. So you've got 13 miles of coastal wetland plain that go all the way down to the bottom. Here is the Waukegan Power Plant. In Wisconsin, everything north of the line is Chewockie Prairie now. The original Chewockie Prairie was the southernmost end, but this is also North Chewockie Prairie all the way up through the dunes. The whole thing is the state natural area. It's a little unusual for a state natural area because those of you who know Carroll Beach know that there are a lot of homes down there and a lot of roads and things like that. There's an awful lot of prairie in there too, as I discovered this year when I had to mow trails that were in the back areas. More than I thought, because most of our time for our organization and the volunteers have been spent in South Chewockie Prairie, which is the last mile before the Illinois-Wisconsin state border. Just south of the border is Spring Bluff. This is a Lake County Forest Preserve District property, and we're very lucky that it's there because both the Ramsar designation and several federal grants that the Lake Plain has had in the past several years are the result of work that started with a restoration ecologist from the Lake County Forest Preserve District, Deb Maurer. She has organized the landowning partners and managers across the state line, and if anybody knows about working across state lines, it can be a tough thing to do. But she did that, and then she also spearheaded getting the Ramsar designation for the whole Lake Plain. So that's where I keep losing my arrow. That's where Chewockie Prairie is the northern half of this, and quite important to it. So you have 13 miles of Lake Michigan coastline here, and federally endangered birds species, but it also provides habitat for 63 state, that's Wisconsin or Illinois, listed species. This is endangered, threatened, or of concern. Also, 930 native plants. Well, our book has some 400 in it, but we have not been able to do a thorough search of Chewockie Prairie, and I'm sure it would be higher. But these are some of the things that got the designation as a Ramsar site, an international site. 300 animal species. Please, everybody knows that animals don't end with the furry ones and the feathery ones. They also include all of the insects, the butterflies, the dragonflies, the spiders, and the crayfish and everything else that goes with it. So there are many more animals in this area than 300. They have 300 that have been listed. And 310 migratory birds, lots of hawks. We have hawk banding and hawk monitoring at Chilwaukee Prairie every fall. This fall, we had 110 got banded, and that included, we have Hoy people here. It included northern harriers, 4 species of hawks, merlins, peregrine falcons, and I'm not a bird person, so I can't remember the others, but I could give anyone interested the list. So those are some of the migratory birds. So this is the reason that this is really an important thing all the way, the whole stretch of it here. And the federal grants that we have received in the last 6 years, 3 of them, sustain our Great Lakes grants, cover the whole territory, work in the whole territory to restore it, to get rid of invasives mostly. This is just Chilwaukee Prairie. Here we have the state line down at the bottom, Sheridan Road, which goes all the way up through Racine, so I know everybody knows it. Don't want that. This last mile from 116th down to the state line, you can see is a rather big stretch. That's 300 acres of South Chilwaukee Prairie. And then from 116th Street all the way up to the dunes is North Chilwaukee Prairie. It wasn't always Chilwaukee Prairie, but we'll get to that too. So this now is the state natural area from the dunes all the way down to the state line. Chilwaukee North, which was originally Carroll Beach Prairie, is 450 acres from the Kenosha Dunes to 116th, and it is being acquired and managed by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources since 1985. They came to the game late. Chilwaukee South, which is where Chilwaukee Prairie gets its name from, that was the original Chilwaukee area, is 300 acres from 116th to the state line. It's a mile, and it was acquired and managed by the Nature Conservancy in the Chilwaukee Prairie Preservation Fund and volunteer committees prior to our fund being incorporated. And that started in 1965. So we've been at this for 50 years. This was our 50th anniversary in 2015, and it's still going on. The south end that the Nature Conservancy owned was transferred recently to the DNR. Some people weren't happy with that. The problem with Nature Conservancy managing it and owning it is that they're in Madison, and they had difficulty bringing resources to this, far corner of the state. So often what they do with their properties, particularly if they're smaller, is transfer them to a local entity that can handle it. Because DNR was buying land in North Chilwaukee, they were the logical organization to have the land transferred to. There's also probably, what's a quarter of 300? 12? What's a quarter of 300? A quarter of the South Prairie is actually owned by the University of Wisconsin Parkside. And the Nature Conservancy deeded that to them for research and education purposes. The Nature Conservancy always had management of it, and DNR now is working out a memorandum of understanding to manage that part of the prairie too. So South Chilwaukee is basically now being handled by the DNR. This sign is rather old. This is right at the corner of 116th and First Court, and you can see it was called a nature preserve way back when, and that it was called a state scientific area, all of which became state natural areas later on, and the National Natural Landmark. But before it was Chilwaukee Prairie, it was something else. We're going way back now. In the beginning, it was called Way Prairie, and it became Chilwaukee Prairie by a combination of Chicago and Milwaukee. Now, those are both Indian names, right? I have no idea what Milwaukee means. Chicago was supposedly a misunderstanding of the word for nodding onion, something like Chicago or Chicago. So it is sort of a modified Indian name. Way Prairie was, Way was a farmer that lived in the area and owned some of the land previously. But back in this is a 1929 map, but the plan started in 1925 by a fellow named Penny and his sons. The idea was to take some of the business away from Lake Geneva and set up a really expensive resort area on Lake Michigan for people from Chicago and Milwaukee. If there were any in Milwaukee, they really thought they would all come from Chicago, though. And then they would have if I can find, this might be hard for the arrow to see if you can see. Down here, there was going to be a train station right at 122nd, so that people could just ride the train down, and then, of course, they would have bus service into the very expensive and large homes that would be built along the lakeshore. Now, this is just from Tobin Road, which is 116th. This only goes a half mile down to 122nd. 122nd was the main entrance. There was no connection to Tobin Road. There was no connection across the state line. The only entrance would have been at 122nd to the exclusive area. These larger lots along the lake and the ones that bordered the north end of the golf course, 18-hole golf course going in, were 100 by 400 feet. That's a pretty good sized lot. Most of the ones along the lake shore are half in the lake at this point. And the others down along this is now First Court on the backside of these lots, and a good part of Lakeshore Drive is in the lake at this point. So it would be 271 lots were originally platted around the golf course and down along the lake shore. They had planned this 18-hole golf course and a hotel, and guess what happened in 1929? I think most everybody in this room learned about it. I didn't say you were there. I said you learned about it. Came the crash in 29, put an end to development. At that point, nothing had been built but 5 houses along the lake shore, right along here. And this one is still there. It's got a big bunker built around it, but it is still there. This part of Lakeshore Drive is in the drink, is gone. And First Court runs along what would have been the golf course down here. This is the remnant of the 9-hole golf course that was built in the Prairie before the crash. The interesting thing about this slide, though, is you can see in the whole area the ridge and swale topography in the light and dark as it goes through here. This little pond was to be in the north 9 holes of the golf course. Didn't happen. It's gone. I don't know what happened to it. The golf course itself was, even by this point, you have a hard time. I tried to figure out where the fairways were in this south end of the golf course, but I couldn't figure it out because they're all mixed up with the swales from the Prairie. At this point, the Prairie has pretty much taken it over, even though there were disturbances later on. So from 1925 to 1965, when the Prairie, you got 9 soggy holes. It's a wetland. It's a wetland. Platting this out and selling these properties was just a boondoggle. I mean, it's as bad as, property in the Everglades. The crash put an end to the development, and now we're just talking south of 116th Street. That was Shiwaukee on the Lake. That's where the name comes from. North of 116th Street, and this is where people get confused. I've seen articles in the paper and in our village newsletter. Edith Rockefeller McCormick had a lot of money, and in the 20s she went in and she bought everything up to the city limits of Kenosha from 116th Street and from Sheridan Road to the lake. And she was going to do the same thing. She was going to put in, shops and hotel and properties and everything. She got a little bit of a later start, did straighten out one creek, unfortunately, but the Depression put an end to her development also. So in 1936, here's a chance for the state of Wisconsin to take all of that land, which is now in foreclosure. I mean, you know, it's nobody's paying taxes on any of it after the Depression hit. They could have purchased everything from the city limits of Kenosha to the state line for a couple of $100,000 for a state park. Can anybody guess why they didn't do it? It wasn't money. They didn't want people from Illinois to use it. They figured those would be the people who would use it. So why build a state park for people from Illinois? Well, guess who moved into Carroll Beach? People from Illinois. Okay, so in 36, it didn't happen. So now you come the 40s, after the war, there's a boom, people are looking for places to live. A fellow named Shafran bought Edith Rockefeller McCormick's land. He got it at a fire sale. Actually, it was a sheriff's sale, and he bought the whole thing. And he started Carroll Beach, named for his daughter, who was born the day he sealed the land purchase. So it became Carroll Beach Estates, and it's several units, and it's also wetland. And in the beginning, they let people even put basements in this area. Well, you know what you do when you put a box in water? It kind of floats. It was a bad idea. Development up there was a bad idea. And a lot of, you know, they've had a lot of problems with water in that area because of the buildings that have gone on. But back down to the south end, the Milwaukee Prairie, in the 40s, they replatted the golf course into, so they wound up with a total, this is the last mile, now there's 633 parcels of land just south of just in the last mile there from the railroad to the lake. The lake erosion had nailed some of the stuff along the lake. But in the early 60s, people were really beginning to recognize the natural value, what an ecological jewel this was. They were out there, they were taking pictures, they were going through and seeing the plants. They had a 1912 plant list that they were working off of, and they were finding these things, and it was like, wow, this place is fabulous. DNR was asked if they wanted to take it on. Now we're back in 1965. Do you want to take on buying this? It's a natural jewel, it's terrific. Well, no, it would be too costly and too difficult. Remember now, they got involved in 1985 buying the north end, so they waited 20 years to get into the game. But DNR backed out. In 1965, a development called Pompeii on the Lake was going to put a marina in the far southeast corner, 1,000 boat slips into the prairie, dig up the prairie and put 1,000 boat slips in there, put in a large motel and resurrect the golf course, which was a soggy thing to begin with. This is a plat map from 116th up here down to the state line, the Wisconsin-Illinois state line, and this is the railroad over here. Now you can see this little strip of land that runs all the way, the whole mile from 116th all the way down to the Illinois-Wisconsin border. And this, by the way, is the golf course that got replatted into an additional 300 and some lots, much smaller than the original lots from the 20s. So the Pompeii on the Lake went to the county board. It was a meeting in winter. It was snowing like crazy. Hugh Iltis, who's I don't know if any of you know the name Hugh Iltis. He was a botanist, a preeminent botanist. Hugh is still alive. Chris studied with him in Madison. He came down in the snowstorm to plead with the county to not allow this development to go in. It would destroy the prairie and to save the prairie. Well, tax dollars were at risk here, so of course the county board goes, oh, okay, we like this development. This will be great. This will be terrific for Kenosha. You know, let them try building in Sway. Anyhow, so they okayed it. There were a group of people, a lot from Racine, several from Kenosha, who went out in the hall. Louise, her son had a trucking company. I can't remember her last name. She got a piece of paper out and she said, I want to start taking names. We're going to start taking names. This isn't going to happen. Al Crampert and Phil Sander. Phil Sander has a park named after him out on Highway 50 just before you get to Woodman's. Phil charted every Indian mound in Kenosha County. He was terrific. He and Al Crampert had been out there. They had seen what the prairie was. They were among the early people who got together. And they were trying to figure out how to stop this thing. Well, they started looking at plat maps, and they saw that little strip of land that went the whole length of Shiawaukee Prairie from 116th down. And, well, the Prairie Patriots, I named them that because, boy, that's what these people were. They were courageous. You're looking at now 633 lots that they want to start buying up for a prairie. Can anybody imagine getting involved in something like that? Wow. So Phil and Al had surveyed it. Jen Crema, who, and I know there are some people, Margie's here, Four Seasons Garden Club. Jen was also one of the founders of the Four Seasons Garden Club in Kenosha. Jim Olson was the botany professor out at the extension at that time. It wasn't Parkside, it was the extension that I went to, which is now Bradford High School. And many, many others got together outside of there, and they went to the Nature Conservancy because DNR was not interested in buying this land, too costly, too difficult. They got a loan from the Nature Conservancy to buy out that mile-long strip of land, which basically did to Pompeii on the lake what happened to Pompeii in, they blew it up. The plan fizzled, they gave it up, they quit trying to do it, and they began buying back an area which, in agreement with the village, had been reduced from the 633 to over 500 lots. So that was already a great savings. But they were buying them one at a time for 2 decades. They would raise funds. They would just go everywhere. They had art sales. I don't know if anybody remembers Mary Alice. Mary Alice did artwork for him. I think her husband was mayor once. What is it? Hammond. Mary Alice Hammond. And if you get our newsletter, if you look at our newsletter, I think her artwork is still on the back of it. We're running out of her artwork. We may have to start republishing old pieces of artwork. But they had art fairs, and they had bake sales, and they gave talks at churches, and they did everything they could to raise funds to start buying back these lots. And so they did that for 2 decades. So in 1967, after they had decided, they called it Shiawaukee Prairie, based on that early land development, it became a state scientific area, which was a boom. That helped a lot. That got a lot of credit going with everyone. And then in the same year, it became the National Natural Landmark. This is 2 years after they started buying it up. So the recognition was there for what an ecological gem it was. Later, the Village of Pleasant Prairie rezoned the study area, which is the area that was going to be prairie, for conservation, which made it easier to buy lots. It also perturbed a lot of people who had bought some of these early lots in the hopes of having their summer home by the lake. I do know one family that built a summer home pretty much in the interior of South Shiawaukee Prairie. It was off of what was called 3rd Avenue. He had to truck in dozens of truckloads of soil to make it high enough to put in just a little cottage that has, and it's still out there, it's one of our historic sites, just the foundation was concrete block, and it was like, I think the whole thing was like 20 by 15, that was the size of the cottage, but he had to truck in all this soil to make the area high enough to build a cottage. This is what everyone who bought land out there was up against for the most part. There were some higher areas, but this is the problem that they had. So people were upset that they bought land that was now conservation zoned, and they weren't going to get their cottage that they wanted. So still 2 generations, in some cases, we're working with the 3rd generation of owner. They are still upset with the fact that this was zoned conservation. And some of them are coming to us. They don't have the same antipathy towards the prairie that the early purchasers did, and they want to sell. But others are hanging in there. So it's going to be a while. We have, at this point, there are still 50 lots south in the south Milwaukee Prairie to be purchased, to be bought back. And at this point, we have a number of willing sellers, and we're hoping DNR gets its acquisition plan going very soon. So in 1985, approached, the Southeast Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission did a whole plan, and they picked out, you know, they looked at the area, they looked at the plants, they looked at the animals, they looked at everything, and they decided that there should indeed be Carroll Beach Prairie and the Milwaukee Prairie should be preserved. So that's when DNR got involved buying the north end, and at that time it was still Carroll Beach Prairie. What the result was that they zoned it, and this was not an uncontested thing, but they zoned 52% of it for preservation, which was terrific, just great. The DNR began buying the land north, and Trident Marina, which was kind of a much reduced version of Pompeii on the lake and had a little marina in the far corner, filed for bankruptcy. A marina in that southeast corner of the state, I mean, you've got the lake and you've got the Illinois border. Illinois put up a breakwater. Do you know what happens when you have something like this and sand coming down the lake? The sand goes right into the marina. And one of the reasons that they filed for bankruptcy is because the boat slips were always full of sand, and they, you know, if you want to park your boat up high, that's great. But if you want to get it in and out, it's not going to work. So, also in 1985, these are two Racine folks who, as young women or little girls, Donna saw the prairie for the first time when she was taking a train ride past the prairie. And she saw it and she thought it was wonderful, and she had always wondered what it was. Joanne Rowan's father took her for a ride down there when she was a young girl. So they were aware of the prairie. And they had been involved with the TNC committee that had been working to buy back lots and that. They were approached by someone in the committee who was ill and had to give it up and said, look, we really need something more stable than an ad hoc committee of the Nature Conservancy to make sure that this prairie is preserved. So they established the Milwaukee Prairie Preservation Fund and filed for a 501c3 with the help of the lawyers from Johnson Wax. Isn't that? Hey, Johnson Wax. They helped them file this. And for the next 22 years, they worked at land acquisition, restoration, fundraising, community outreach continued. In 1985 alone, and I can't imagine this because I give one or two of these a year, and that's, you know, that's about it. They gave 37 slideshow presentations to raise funds in the first year that they were incorporated. The mission statement of our organization is simple: acquire, restore, preserve, manage prairie lands in Milwaukee Prairie. And in 1985, it was still the Carroll Beach Prairie, so also in the Carroll Beach area of Kenosha County. Now, they were basically working in South Milwaukee, but because the mission statement and the bylaws and the articles of incorporation include the Carroll Beach area, we're free to acquire and work up there with DNR. As well as promote conservation education of its members, well, some of you are members, and the general public. I consider you a special segment of the general public because of your attachment to the earth and what grows in it. How do we do it? Donations. We don't do bake sales anymore. We do have the newsletter, which is up there, and that is our one outreach for donations a year. It comes out in December because we don't spend a lot of money on things besides land acquisition and land management. So we have one newsletter that we send out a year, and then we have monthly email notices. And there's a sign-up sheet up there if anybody wants to get those. So the donations go for land acquisition or land management only, and the donors can designate if they only want it to go for acquisition, that's fine. If they give us the discretion to use it for acquisition or land management, that's great, because in recent years, land management has become a whole lot more important because of the influx of invasive and exotic species into the prairie. We've had to do more and more management. We've had stewardship grants from the state. We've had small grants, one from Root Pike Wind. I'm sure a lot of you know Root Pike Wind. And that was for our plant monitoring, our rare plant monitoring program. And we've had sponsors for our Prairie Porta Potty. This is important for volunteers out there. This is something that we try to get a contractor or someone else to sponsor. And equipment. We Energies, we had some good friends at We Energies for a long time. And they gave us our trailer in 2001, I think. And we're still using that trailer to haul equipment around. Volunteer hours. We couldn't do it without volunteers. Everybody who's ever been involved with the Prairie, through the committee, through our organization, through the people who come to work days, we're all volunteers. And those hours in the Prairie are used as a match for grants. We've had 3 Sustain Our Great Lake federal grants that apply to the whole lakeshore, but we have pledged acquisition funds to the first one because we bought a big lot on Lakeshore Drive, between First Court and Lakeshore Drive. It was big bucks, and that we provided half of the match for that grant. The next 2 grants, we pledged $30,000 in volunteer hours. That's a lot of volunteer hours. So we really need volunteers to help us out. And this is always with grants, this is what we do. We pledge our volunteer hours. And Four Season Restoration volunteers, this is one of the earlier pictures. In the red jacket, you can see Lenny Weiss. He's a master gardener. I think probably everybody's heard a joke from Lenny Weiss. And some of our other people, this fellow here, Don Snyder, he's from Menominee Falls. He came down every month throughout the year from Menominee Falls to work as a volunteer on our third Saturdays. John Harbeck came all the way from Cedarburg down every month to work, and John is still doing it. Eric Howe, if any of you are in Hoy Audubon, Eric was past president of Hoy Audubon. He's our treasurer. We couldn't live without him. Heather Patty just moved back to North Carolina, but in the meantime, she was on our board. She was an employee of the Nature Conservancy and came to our work days. And then she went off into natural landscaping company and did some contractor work for us. It's a family thing. Anyhow, all 4 seasons we do it. And what do? Invasive and exotic species control at this point in time is probably our biggest task. We have a list of 85 exotic or invasive species. Well, why do I make the distinction? Because some native species can be invasive in a prairie. Cottonwood, green ash, those are native trees. They don't belong in a prairie, and if we had the right amount of fire, they wouldn't be there. But exotic species can be extremely troublesome because they can outcompete our natives because they green up earlier, their seed production, we don't see them before they get going, which is why we have people scouting for invasive species. We mow trails out there so people can get around more easily, and fire breaks in the fall for the hoped for prescribed fires. We track land acquisitions. We keep track of who still owns what, talk to them, send letters, and we're going to do much more of that under DNR. Trash patrol. We have a board member and his wife who live right on 116th, and they do trash patrol around the prairie all the time. Seed collection and distribution. This is something that's going to be much more important in the near future. Where the golf course was and where all those extra roads got platted, there was disturbance. It wasn't plowed, but road, where they were going to put roads in, they didn't pave them, but they heaped up the dirt. Where the golf course was, they knocked back that. It didn't kill the seed bank, because you can go through those areas and you can find tons of natives, but the more diversity is what we would like. So in the future, we would collect seed and distribute it to areas that could use a little more diversity. Neighbor notifications. We have to notify the neighbors when we're going to have prescribed fire. We also have a neighbor day so that they can come and talk to us, learn a little more about the history if they're new to the area. share with us what they've seen. Boy, we've had some animal sightings. We had one fella, he saw a river otter. He was sure it was a river otter. Anybody seen any river otters? It was a mink. We have lots of mink. And it was a mink, and mink like to flap around in the water too. So neighbor days, neighbor notifications. We need historical research. We haven't been able to put anybody on that one. That's a volunteer effort that we would really like to fulfill. Frog monitoring. We have a wonderful woman who is executive director and a naturalist at a place on Milwaukee Avenue in Illinois, and I can't remember the name of it, but Sue Holt is going to handle frog monitoring and training anyone who wants to do frog monitoring out at Chilwaukee. It's a fun thing to do. Boy, you learn the different noises that they make. Youth projects. We have Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, but it's not a regular thing. We're starting to hook into the Cub Scouts at the Prairie Lane Elementary School in Pleasant Prairie, which is where the Prairie is, Pleasant Prairie, the village of Pleasant Prairie. So we're going to get the Cub Scouts hooked in routinely so that as these kids grow up, they come back to the Prairie repeatedly. We, as you all know, we need to replace ourselves, and so it's got to start with the kids, getting them out there. Bird surveys, we did 5 years of bird surveys. We haven't done the last couple of years. We're going to have to start that again. Because if you do it one day a year, and it's a rainy day or crappy weather or nobody shows up to do every area, you don't get the right count, so we need to do that again. Board of directors, boy, that's a fabulous group of volunteers. They put it out, and we couldn't do what we do without the wonderful people on our board. And work days aren't all that bad. This is our Queen Anne's Lace gathering. I made it sound nice so people would come to it. And they had just worked for 3 hours in pretty warm weather collecting, and that truck load has been pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. They worked for 3 hours pulling Queen Anne's Lace on that Labor Day, and they still look pretty happy. I think that's, that's pretty good. Now we have another volunteer, a non-human volunteer. I think it's the next slide. Yes, here he is, or she, or whatever. This is the caterpillar of a narrow-winged orbit moth. I think I've got that right. Magusa divaricata. And this little moth migrates up from the south. And apparently it's not finding enough buckthorn to eat in the south because it's coming up here to eat buckthorn. Can you imagine? It is a native moth. Native. So this is what they do to buckthorn. Can you see them? I think you can see them up there. They start at the top. Yes. Let's hear it for Magusa. They start at the top of the shrub and they just eat it down completely. If you were to touch one of these, we tried collecting some and we had to learn fast that if you touch a branch at all, they all drop to the ground. They are not going to be eaten by birds. So they all drop to the ground and then they come back up and eat some more. And they did such a terrific job. Not this past year, not in 2015, because if you remember, we had a really cold beginning of the summer. And if it's a migratory thing, they have to have the right conditions to come up. So they didn't join us, but we have the welcome wagon out for them this year, and we're hoping that they make a reappearance. Our best management tool is fire, prescribed burns. In the early years of the Prairie, and you'll see some scenes that were taken in the 70s, etc., they burned a lot more often. The railroad would burn. They'd flip out a flare. They would flip a flare into the Prairie when they were going by, and the whole thing would burn. So it was great for years. The Prairie got burned. More houses. The railroad doesn't do that anymore. The last time they had an unexpected fire out there, the fire trucks from Pleasant Prairie tooled out there. This must have been about 12 years ago or more. They went out there and got stuck in the wet prairie, and lucky their fire trucks didn't burn up. So now it's prescribed fire. You have to have the right weather conditions. You have to have the right equipment working. You have to have, a tank pumper to make sure there's enough water out there to wet the sides down. Everybody has to be certified to do it. We have some volunteers that are burn certified. So it's more difficult to do, especially the weather conditions. This fall they were going to burn several areas and they couldn't do it because it was too damp. But prescribed fire is what keeps down the the brush, and a lot of the invasives are very susceptible to fire. If you have a fall burn, this is what it looks like in winter, and it's really great because you can see in the spring it's going to be black soil. That sun's going to beat down, and it's going to get everything coming up great. And all the duff that was impeding the plants is gone. Now we're going to take a look at some of the residents or visitors to the prairie. This guy will be back next month. This is the male red-winged blackbird. He'll be out there singing his song, and apparently every one of these guys has a different song, although probably only the females can tell that. They'll be staking out areas. They come a month or more before the females ever come up, so they'll be out in the prairie doing that. This is one of our first flowers, which will come out in April. And the interesting thing around it is that is all narrow-leaved cattail. If you don't have fire and you can't burn the duff off, it chokes out the natives. The contractors have been very good on the Sustain Our Great Lakes contract, getting rid of a lot of the narrow-leaved cattail, which is exotic, and the hybrid cattail, which is also exotic because the only native cattail is the broad-leafed cattail, and it doesn't grow in these dense patches which have very little habitat value. It grows scattered. You can see it down south of, in South Illinois Beach. You can see some of it scattered. You can also see big patches of the hybrid too, and the narrowleaf. Anyhow, this is our marsh marigolds, one of our first ones. And this, if you have a fire out there, the way they did last year, this spring, the shooting stars are just phenomenal. Pink, lavender, white, just really great. This is the shooting star close up. It's really a spectacular flower. And it's not that difficult to grow in gardens. And it grows in sunshine, it'll grow in part shade. This is a very old shot of the prairie. You can see very little brush. You can see forever. And the yellow in the back here, this is all marsh marigold growing in the wetter areas. You can see a little water out here. And so that's all marsh marigold out there in the early spring. And then up closer here, you have the shooting stars. I apologize for the fuzziness. This is a really delicious plant. Ingrid tells me, though, that I shouldn't tell you to try it. But when we were kids, we would pull a blossom off, and you can see they're nicely curved, and suck the nectar out. Really delicious. Pollinators love this flower in the springtime. And this is a really wonderful thing. Cotton grass. It's not a grass, it's a sedge. Sedges are the ones that have edges and no joints. And we have a variety of sedges on the prairie. We also have carex on the prairie, like 26 species of carex, which also have edges. And this little guy, you'll only find him in a wetland area. He's the sedge wren, and sedges, like most of them, like damp areas, so in the wetter areas of the prairie. And he looks so huge here, doesn't he? He's a little critter. You'll often see combinations of plants. We don't, you see the shooting stars, they're all over. There aren't that many spring flowers, but when you get a variety of the plants coming up, they'll be scattered. They won't be clustered so much. They'll be scattered all over. So you'll see a little hoary puccoon one place, and all over as you walk, you'll see a lot of different things. And as you come to the prairie, week after week, you will see different things. Come out in the spring, come in a summer month, make several visits, you'll see all different things blooming. They don't bloom through the whole summer the way some of the garden plants. I mean, you pick them because they're going to be blooming and nice in your gardens for a long period of time. Prairie plants don't work that way very well. They pretty much come into season and go out of season. This is one of our red plants, the Indian paintbrush. We also have the cardinal plant, Lobelia cardinale. The red one, there aren't a lot of red natives. This guy, called the reverse tuxedo, the bobolink, he is a grassland bird, and we're hoping that they come back. They were at Shiwaukee. Brush came in and reduced the grassland areas that are farther in, but we're getting him back in shape, and we have seen him coming through. He's been spotted at the prairie year after year, but we haven't known them to nest there in recent years. He's not eating a Magusa divaricata. That's something else. No, they're not allowed to eat them. Lupin. We transferred some seed from the far west side of the prairie up near the railroad over to First Court. And as you go down First Court up to 121st, when the lupin are blooming, there's a whole field of lupin. It is spectacular. Just incredible. And I don't know if you know lupin, when it's ready to give out its seed, if you want to collect seed, you better be standing right there because it shoots them out. It's sort of like jewelweed. The Coreopsis, we have a couple of species of Coreopsis, the lanceolata and the palmata. This is a favorite garden plant, I think, for many people. And this little guy, my brother-in-law took this picture past summer. I don't know what kind of butterfly it is. We had a butterfly blitz in June of 2012. In 2 hours, these people counted 34 different species of butterflies. That's on one day for 2 hours, 34 species. So you can imagine there's probably quite a few more out there, and some of them are really unusual. The spiderwort, this is a big garden plant. This will bloom repeatedly through the summer. The interesting thing about spiderwort, which some of you probably know, that blossom will be for one day. It hopes to get pollinated because at the end of the day it's going to melt. And if you walk past spiderwort in the prairie late in the day, after those blossoms have closed, you will wind up with blue streaks across your legs because they literally do melt. And this is one of the more spectacular sights in the prairie, the Michigan lily, the Turk's cap lily, just a great thing. I tried planting these in Chicago. I had a native garden behind our house, and I tried planting them. The squirrels really loved them. Didn't work out. And this is another one of beauty. The way to see the prairie is to walk slowly through it, because you come upon something like this, and it is just so gorgeous, you almost want to get down, kneel next to it, and take a really good look at it, because it's just fabulous. Prairie coneflower, Ratibida pinnata, that's how I say it. If anyone who knows me knows that I am not a native plant specialist. I am an invasive plant specialist. That's where I spend my time and effort, and I have avoided showing you those because I want you to fall in love with the prairie. The nodding onion. This is where Chicago got its name. This is Chicago. And they are easy to grow, very easy to grow. I had a lot of them in my yard in Chicago. I do now. Butterfly milkweed. I'm sure you've all seen it. This is a good garden grower too. Pollinators love it. Monarchs, of course, are obliged to lay their eggs on milkweed. If they do not lay their eggs on milkweed, their eggs will not survive. They have to be on milkweed so that the larva can take advantage of the milkweed. We have 8 species of milkweed that we invite them to land on. In 2001, they tagged monarchs in Chilwaukee Prairie, and several months later, 5 of them were found in Mexico. So they traversed all the way from, this is how monarchs do it, the flight down is all one butterfly. There's no stopping off to propagate. Coming up, they stop several times to propagate. So we have 8 species, at least 2 of which I think are on the heritage list. And here's a bronze copper. This picture was taken during the butterfly blitz in 2012. And Liatris, the prairie blazing star, that very first block that has the big brown sign in it that's now very outdated, is full of these in season, which would be later summer. And we have 4 species of Liatris on the prairie. These guys, these are really fun to watch fly around. They're insect eaters. And you get this white stripe on the tail. You can't miss them. If you see a kingbird, you know what it is. Aren't they pretty? That's so soft looking. Prairie dock, one of the 3 silphiums that we have on the prairie. This is probably not something you'd grow in your garden. The leaves can be 2 feet tall and 1 foot wide. And because this one is in a place in the prairie where the plant material is all very dense, where it's not quite as dense, you can get prairie dock growing this tall, which is another reason you probably wouldn't want to put it in your garden, but it's great in the prairie. The other one is the compass plant. It has a cut leaf, and supposedly they turn so that you can tell which direction is which because they follow the sun. I've never used that to find my way around. And rosinweed is the other silphium that we have out there, a lot of it. Joe Pye weed. In some areas of the prairie that are a little more disturbed, we can get Joe Pye weed this tall. It's one of our eupatoriums. I think we have bone set, snake roots, another kind of bone set, and Joe Pye weed for eupatoriums. And the calico pennant. This picture was taken on that blitz, but they weren't actually looking at dragonflies. We would love to have someone come out and look at the dragonflies. There are times out there in the summer where the dragonflies are, you just can't take your eyes off the sky because they are that thick, taking care of the mosquitoes. Isn't that great? They're carnivorous. They're so pretty, but they're carnivorous. Okay. This is one of our smaller orchids. It's only about this tall. And there's another lady's tresses that isn't nodding. And the way you tell the difference between the two of them is by smell. That lets me out. I can't tell the difference between, I can't do it. But that's how the real aficionados do. We have things out there besides plants and mammals. This is one of the more beautiful spiders. I have never seen one in the prairie. Somebody gave me this picture. We do need, the insects that are out there besides the butterflies have never been really counted. They do know they have the silphium borer out there, which is an endangered insect. Beyond that, we're not sure whatever else is out there. We have things like land crayfish. You can find them. They're easy to find. You go into the wetter areas, and the grasses form hillocks. And under that hillocks is a hole, and right in front of it is a bunch of snail shells crushed up that you know that there's a crayfish in that hole. Long about fall, some of our taller grasses, and this is turkey foot, big blue stem. You can see the turkey foot, I think. It's all of you who have live turkeys. No? Okay. And Indian grass, which is another one of our tall grasses. This is, and you can see the Laetris, the prairie blazing star there towards fall. In the fall, when the grasses like this are tall, there are areas of the prairie where if it's a windy day, you want to walk through it. It is magic. I can't explain it to you. The feel of the grasses, the sight, the sound of the wind going through them, really, really wonderful. So in the fall, this next slide is something that happens all over Wisconsin. The sandhill cranes do their fall dance. If you've ever seen it anywhere, we saw it up north once on a side road. We were coming down, and they were dancing and yelling. It was great. This is not a picture from the prairie. This my brother-in-law took this summer. This is a picture from the prairie. And I was driving out there, and I had heard cranes out there. But I saw 3 brown lumps out in the prairie, and I thought, oh dear, someone has gone all the way out there to dump. And I sat and I watched for a while, and then one of these heads, the red head, popped up and looked around and went back down. It was Mom and Dad and the fledgling feeding. They nested in South Shiwaukee Prairie last year. They may have nested in North Shiwaukee, but we're not sure. And the year before, they nested in Spring Bluff, just south of the state line. So we have sandhill cranes back, and this is because of the federal grant that allowed contractors to come in to get rid of very large swaths of the narrow-leafed cattail. So it provided the habitat for the cranes to come back. This is glorious. You love cranes? I did it for the Cub Scouts. Should I do it? That scared the heck out of them. But the cranes make a noise. Those of you who have heard it, you know, you hear it, you know it's a crane. And this fall, we were watching them fly over. We were out there just figuring out what to do for a work day. Must have been October. No, it was December. And the cranes were flying by. They were late leaving. It was just flock after flock of the cranes flying over and making those wonderful sounds. One of the last flowers that will bloom in the prairie in the fall is the gentian. This color is spectacular, and when you see it in person, you do go down on your knees to get a good look at it. It's just fabulous. We have 4 species of gentians on the prairie. This is probably the lesser fringed. It has a little bit of a fringe. There's the fringed, which has more of a fringe, and if you go to our website, the picture on it is the fringed gentian. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And then there's the downy gentian, which has no fringe, and there's the bottle gentian, which never opens. How the heck does it get pollinated? It gets pollinated because the bumblebee will come to it and force its way in to get the nectar out of that bottle gentian, and that's how it gets pollinated. I mean, really, they just are tight closed. So that is what's going on in the fall. And then we have the sunset to end the day on the prairie. I would ask you all, if you want more information, go to our website. That's the Chewauquee Prairie Preservation Fund website. If you would like to know what's going on in the prairie, keep updated on it. We send out 1 email a month to tell people what's going to go on in the workday, and also what else is going on, what other activities are going on. The next one, anyone interested in rare plant monitoring. Kay McClellan will train you. It's not that difficult. You love pretty flowers. These are some of the rarest and most precious things on the prairie that we try to monitor to see where they are and how many we have. So anybody wants to help with that, Kay's phone number and contact information are also on page 2 of the newsletter up there. And then we're on Facebook, so you can get some of the same information off of Facebook if you don't want us to send you the monthly email. So I thank you all. This has been a pleasure for me to be able to present my prairie to you.